Hey everybody, this is Romulus at Rob the Movie Buff on Twitter and at Romulus on Letterboxd. Hope everyone's doing well. I'm here to review a pair of multiverse films, beginning with Across the Spiderverse, which is directed by Joaquim Dos Santos, Kemp Powers, and Justin K. Thompson. It is the follow-up to 2018's Into the Spider-Verse, which introduced Miles Morales, voiced by Shameik Moore, as a new Spider-Man and fellow Spider-People as well. I loved Into the Spider-Verse when first seeing it in theaters, and seeing it a few times more since has put even more admiration for me. It's only grown for me with incredible and unique animation. It melds CG animation with 2D, hand-drawn, and 3D animation to go with a fun but also emotionally grounded story. And Miles goes through teen angst but also personal tragedy while seeing his universe's Peter Parker and Spider-Man die, and having to step in for his universe as Spider-Man. Soon though, he has to work with Gwen Stacy. Haley Steinfeld is the voice for Gwen Stacy, Spider-Gwen. Peter B. Parker, Spider-Man from another universe, voiced by Jake Johnson, and then other Spider-People as well, in order to save his city and get them back to their universe. And now Across the Spider-Verse picks up 16 months after those events, with Miles close to finishing up high school and needing to look at colleges while also embracing his secret identity as the new Spider-Man in his universe. However, the story starts with an incredible prologue that focuses on Gwen Stacy's loneliness resulting from returning to her universe, the previous death of her universe's Peter Parker, a high school friend, and a strained relationship with her father, Police Captain George Stacy, voiced by Shea Wiggum. To go along with one of favorite prologues in a long time, Across the Spider-Verse has one of the more creative and unique origins for a villain I've ever seen in the spot, voiced by Jason Schwartzman. And Miles initially views him as an easy enemy to take out, but he slowly becomes an incredible force to be reckoned with. Morales also has issues with his parents, Rio, voiced by Luna Lauren Velez, and Jefferson, a police captain, voiced by Brian Tyree Henry, as he wants more freedom and they're trying to make sure he doesn't forget where he came from. Miles and Gwen eventually reunite and work together to help with keeping the Spider-Verse intact, a mission led by Spider-Man 2099, Miguel O'Hara, voiced by Oscar Isaac. But as they learn more about his plans and perspective, previous allegiances and alliances are tested, and both Miles and Gwen are forced to make tough decisions. As a sequel, Across the Spider-Verse takes the great animation and brings it to a whole new level in both how many more animation styles are included, the water and pastel colors in Gwen's universe that change with her mood being the standout, and also in how more detailed and gorgeous it is. It's just basically pure art. While it has a massive amount of Easter eggs, few if any really disrupt the film and the tone of it, and also with so many free-flowing and dynamic action sequences, the quiet conversation and character conflict scenes is where the movie really shines. The voice acting as a whole again is stellar, with Steinfeld being great with more time in her story, and as the emotional heart of the film. Moore as the lead is phenomenal as well, and Oscar Isaac really brings an intense and serious approach, with the rest of the Spider-People having a sense of humor, and he really has none. Miguel is of the belief that any changes to his ultimate plan are not acceptable, and Isaac really puts that character perspective on full display. The performances by the parents are basically underrated MVPs for this movie, with Velez great as Rio, especially when she talks to Miles, and Brian Tyree Henry as Jefferson, and also Shea Wiggum as Gwen Stacy's dad, as the scenes with Gwen and him are maybe the most emotional in the movie. The soundtrack done in the first film by Daniel Pemberton is still one I listen to and love, and this one brings a more frenetic pace and elements to it, such as Gwen Stacy's guitar, Miguel's theme, and is also fantastic, even though it is different from the first. Overall, I really love this movie. One of the few main critiques is that it doesn't have a true ending, but in my opinion, I do feel that the two leads in the movie grow and have an incredible arc that sets it up for what they will do and what they'll have to do and what they'll be challenged with in Beyond the Spider-Verse. There are a ton of parallels to the Matrix films, with the first Spider-Verse having the lead learn about a new universe and power that he has and having the confidence to use it by the end, and the second with the leads thinking they know how to handle everything until they see the full extent of the new environments and universe they are in, and having to be challenged to a new degree. Overall, I have next to no complaints about it, and I have it as a 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5 on Letterboxd. The next film I'm reviewing is The Flash, directed by Andy Muschietti and starring Ezra Miller as Barry Allen / The Flash, and has the return of Michael Keaton to the role of Bruce Wayne / Batman. The story revolves around Barry finding an ability to use his Speed Force powers to go back in time and help save his mother from murder and keep his family together. But this choice creates unintended consequences for the entire universe, with the established Justice League removed from the picture and Barry to when he first got his powers. However, he sees his past version and must interact with him in order to stop Zod, Michael Shannon, from taking over Metropolis and Gotham in a manner similar to Man of Steel. Actually, he finds that universe's version of Bruce Wayne / Batman, played by Michael Keaton, and works to convince him to fight off Zod. This film has one of the more prolonged and cursed productions that any film in recent memory has, with ideas in pre-production ever since the DCU began in 2013. So over the last decade, it's gone through multiple directors and writers before selling on Muschietti to direct. And then there's the story by John Francis Daley, Jonathan Goldstein, and Joby Harold. Of course, there's Ezra Miller and the accusations and behavior that they've exhibited. And on the whole, personally, I've never found their performance compelling and oftentimes obnoxious, especially in the Joss Whedon cut of Justice League. And unfortunately in this film, they're even more annoying and grating, and neither version of Barry is likable for the majority of the runtime. Speaking of Whedon, there's a lot of Joss Whedon Justice League level humor that just doesn't work, and yet there's also slow-mo action scenes for Batman that, is similar to what Zack Snyder did with all his action scenes, but somehow Muschietti's version and execution is just far less stellar. On the whole, there's just so much messiness that I haven't even gotten started with. The few positives I'll go with: both Batman are pretty great. Ben Affleck's last interpretation of the character is basically a glorified cameo for 5 to 10 minutes. Somehow he's not listed in the final credits. I don't know what that's about. But he does have a great scene with Barry talking about accepting personal tragedy and trauma as part of your life and not letting it define you. And then Keaton is a lot of fun and brings both seriousness and levity in his return to the role, although contrasted with the heightened levels of goofiness, it's just so off-putting, and it doesn't feel like the Batman from the Tim Burton movies. It just feels like, oh, Michael Keaton back as Batman, without, any context. The suit scene reveal with the old Tim Burton music, even though it's teasing the trailer and it's nostalgia bait, it's one of the better scenes in the movie. I'll give it that. I think the Speed Force scenes are pretty great for the most part, but the more CG effects come into play for the whole film, and even in those scenes, the worse it gets and looks. I do think the double Barry effects are mostly seamless, save for a couple scenes. But as far as massive pluses go, that's pretty much it, except for Sasha Calle as Supergirl, who does decent with just really nothing to do and no real attempt to give her any heart or story. And I do wonder, with the reports of several endings being shot, the film production and post-production going through multiple WB and DC regimes, how much the VFX department had to work with and comb through just to get to scenes that they could work on and somewhat perfect. And as a whole, VFX industry and workers in that environment, they're already mistreated as it is. But that being said, the visual effects throughout are horrid and just high levels of uncanny valley that can practically take me and maybe you and practically everyone else out of any action scenes, especially in the third act, where everything from the background to the soldiers to the ships and the hand-to-hand fight scenes, nothing looks real. It does not look real at all. It honestly looks like bad video game cutscenes. And the cameos involved, they border on both visually off and just in poor taste. Zod is barely in the film, and Michael Shannon's comments before the film's release about not finding this Zod interpretation really thrilling or nuanced or deep for him to like dive into in comparison to Man of Steel. It's readily apparent in his performance, and the showing and build up of him is just so lazy. So he doesn't feel like very motivated. And that's a shame, because Miles Shan's one of the great actors ever, but it doesn't seem like he basically said before the release of the film that multiverse movies feel like to him just action figures just fighting. So whatever good things this movie does, there's always a minimum of 2 or 3 stupid things that it does right around the corner, and it comes right around the corner. There's bad needle drops. The visual effects, obviously, bad jokes and humor, and weirdly, there's attempts to make Barry likable briefly, followed by like one thing to make him as unlikable as possible. The last 20 to 30 minutes of this movie, trying to not go into spoilers, definitely not going into spoilers, they basically take the events of the previous hour and a half to 2 hours, and they kind of render it meaningless. And this is especially aggravating because basically the whole point of the Flashpoint storyline, at least for the DCU leading up to it, it felt like it was supposed to set up a new world with new versions of these established Justice League characters. But this movie doesn't even do that, and it just leaves me with more questions than I did before entering the theater. Overall, I can't give this movie anything more than a 4 or a 2 out of 5 on Letterboxd, and so far ranks as, the biggest disappointment for me this year in terms of movies. This film was mostly completed before James Gunn took over in a more creative role at Warner Brothers / DC, and his involvement in crafting the film, I don't know to what extent is, since he was in the post-production stage of Guardians 3, also writing Superman Legacy, and setting up, the DC future slate. I would guess very little, but I don't know. It's possible that the announcement of the DC slate so early probably turned audiences off to The Flash, since there was no guarantee of future connections to future movies. But the past 2 DC films to kill out the box office were The Batman and Joker, 2 projects that were unconnected from the universe and prestige films. So I think quality or lack thereof, like being apparent in some of the marketing and trailers and everything like that, that was also probably an issue. Either way, it's probably the end of Ezra Miller as Flash. Good thing in my opinion, and it's an unfortunate waste of some good casting in the DCU, like Affleck I enjoyed, Henry Cavill I enjoyed, Gal Gadot I enjoyed, Jason Momoa, Ray Fisher, and just due to bad planning, poor writing, executive interference, and all a bunch of stuff. It's pretty much the end of the DCU. I know there's Aquaman 2 coming up, but who knows with that one. But it is what it is. I think it's just best to move in a new direction. But thanks for tuning in, and hope you guys have a great week.